once the pandemic hit, the Law School Admission Council, LSAC, they switched the exam to be online and they went to a 3-section format. They also changed the name temporarily to be the LSAT Flex, indicating what? Flexibility, maybe that it wasn't the regular LSAT, maybe it wasn't the long-term plan. And so as the pandemic kind of comes to a close, we hope, they are shifting the format once again to be 4 sections. So they're adding back in an experimental section starting with the August 2021 LSAT. The reason they're doing that is because they want to test out new LSAT questions for future test forms. Nobody wants to do an experimental section. It does cause anxiety, and it is an unwelcome change. So basically, I think the anxiety comes from the fact that you're doing a longer exam. The LSAT Flex was seemingly easier, and it actually was easier for a lot of folks because it's a shorter exam. Endurance is not as much of an issue. When you add in an extra section, you now have a longer test sitting. And you also have the uncertainty around not knowing what the content of that extra section is going to be. So are you doing a second section of logic games, a second section of logical reasoning, or a second section of reading comprehension? And what's the placement of that section in the 4 sections total? It could be first, second, third, or fourth. And while you're doing it, you don't know whether it counts. So it's the feeling of not knowing which one it is while you're doing it. If you screwed up on something, is it the one that counted or the one that didn't matter? Obviously, you hope it's the one that didn't matter, but you're never really going to know. And once you get your score back, you can kind of guess at it, of course. And you could, of course, talk online with others on forums and such after the fact. A certain amount of that is allowed if you keep it vague and general in nature. But yeah, you don't know which one it is during, and that causes problems. You don't know whether to cancel your score or keep it, factors like that. Of course, how can you not try to guess at it? It's what you're thinking about, obviously. So it's like, don't think of an elephant. Of course, you're going to think of an elephant. You're going to, of course, try to figure it out during, which I don't recommend. You're going to try and figure it out after, which is fine, although I recommend generally staying off of the forums because they only feed the anxiety. But it's not obviously harder. It's not obviously different. They're not testing out some radically new question type. They're trying to calibrate the difficulty of sections as a whole, largely, for future test administrations, when what is currently an experimental section will become one of the scored sections on a future exam. But these are very subtle differences in difficulty. It's not like you're going to have 4 super tough logic games on the experimental and then 4 average difficulty ones on the actual. It's not like that. And they're not different question types either. It's just basically maybe on a scored section, you have 1 easy, 2 moderate, 1 difficult, because there are 4 logic games total in the section. And then on the experimental section, maybe it's like 2 easy, 1 moderate, 1 difficult. But where do you draw the line between easy and moderate? These are all shades of gray. You need to give your full effort on every section as if it was scored. Everything stays the same. So you're still doing 1 scored section of logic games, 1 scored of logical reasoning, 1 scored of reading comprehension. What happens within a section is exactly the same, whether it's the LSAT Flex, the new 4-section LSAT, as well as all prior LSATs all the way back to 1991. None of that changes. All that is different now is that they are adding back in the experimental section. So you're doing an additional 4th section that could be any of those 3 types: games, reasoning, or reading comprehension. But what happens within that extra section is also going to appear identical to all other LSAT sections back to 1991. The only change that's happened that's really significant is back in June 2007, when they added in a dual comparative reading comp passage. I should just mention that to be comprehensive in what I'm saying here, but that's not related to this format change. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.